Hi everyone! I've invited you here today, Tana, because the idea is to have a small conversation about how the two of us practice languages which are not our native languages together, how we succeed, how we fail. If you want to see this in the summary of this conversation in a more short form, we have another video for that and an article. However, if you want to have all the details and really get to know us a bit better, then this video is a good way.
Well, I think that we had very different processes to getting to speak these languages. You had a more, I would say, you had a structure for languages. In a way, you had more structure than I had. In another way, I had a more traditional structure to learning languages. I would normally enroll in classes, not throughout all my learning process, but I would have a little bit of classes and then try to do this immersion.
Yeah.
So when I really felt that I learned French was when I went to France. And when I really felt that I learned Norwegian was when I met you.
And that's really the idea as well, to kind of how to create this language immersion at home. Because that's what we try to do with German,
That's
with
true.
French, with Spanish, which are languages we're not in touch with usually in our everyday life. So then the only way to really practice those are making that immersion at home. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how to kind of build your day-to-day life with the person you speak a lot to or speak the most to, whether it's a partner like us or just a close friend, a family member, or a language partner that you found solely for that purpose.
For me, it was very new to do this immersion at home thing. Well, my mom, for example, she always thought that we could try to do something similar with English, and it was very hard for me to manage to switch the language.
You get annoyed.
Yeah, but not annoyed because it wasn't good enough, but because I felt that our intimacy was built in Portuguese.
Yeah.
And our intimacy was also not necessarily 24 hours per day of feeling that we're in school. If we're trying to learn a new language, if we're learning a new language and speaking a different language, suddenly I felt that the environment at home switched, and it was more of a school and less of our normal intimacy.
And that's not ideal. And I think...
But with you it worked.
Yeah, and after giving this a lot of thought, I really think that, I think there are two reasons why we usually find it so difficult to speak a language other than the language of our first choice language. One is that it's more difficult in a way, so things take longer time. It's just so easy to switch to English or another language we speak better for the ease of it. But the other, I really think, is this also that if you've gotten to know a person in one language, it's so strange to switch to a different language. Yeah, so I think those are maybe the two main challenges you have to tackle in a way.
Yes, and it's not even, for me, it's weird to switch to a different language of someone I already know. Not because I don't feel extremely comfortable with the language, the new language we're switching to, but the switching part. I remember when I was in Costa Rica, and I was talking to, I had a friend, she was from Canada, but we would always speak Spanish together because we were in Costa Rica. And sometimes she wanted to speak English. And it felt so weird for me. So it wasn't the language level at all, because we both, it's her native language, and I feel still more comfortable with English, I think, than with Spanish, perhaps. But just the switching part. And with you, what was interesting was that when we met, from the start, we tried to go to different languages. And none of us started with the language that was our native language. Maybe that's also something that helped.
So we started off finding out that we spoke 5 different languages, and those happened to be exactly the same ones. We had our first date in Spanish, the second one in Portuguese, which was particularly difficult for me, and then French, and then we got
very
so
difficult
tired.
For me, very okay for you at the time, I think.
Tricky as well.
Then we entered into the English trap, and then I said, stop, this doesn't make sense, let's go back to Spanish. And I went back to Spanish, but Aiden was very strategic, and he wanted to be very good at Portuguese. So what he did was that we would speak our language, which at the time was more Spanish, together. And when he would text me, he would text me in Portuguese, necessarily. And surprisingly, that worked very well. Perhaps because he didn't use Google Translator, he actually tried to learn. And suddenly, I could see that his learning curve was just going up and up and up and up. And I felt very stagnated with my Norwegian.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the best tips that of this video. Because at the time I was not comfortable just speaking Portuguese with you. It was difficult for me, difficult to understand you. It was very tricky. So then just writing all the messages in Portuguese, because that gives you the time to think through the phrases, look up words, and also when you see things written out, you remember it so much better. So it's really great for learning. So then after just a couple of weeks of testing a lot in Portuguese, without Google Translate, but with dictionaries, it was already so much easier to speak to you. So that's really extremely efficient, and that's also something I think we tried it out a bit, because now German is our 6th language that we're learning together because you live there. So I think that's something we've spoken about, and that we really need to return to. Maybe all our texting could be in German now, because it's still at the level where it's not so comfortable speaking it together still. Yeah.
Perhaps it's been harder writing, but not necessarily your way. But your way takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it takes time writing those messages. Yeah, it does. It's time you invest in the moment to make it easier to speak that language afterwards. But yeah, it is a bit tricky. You have to be very consistent, and that's why it's so good being 2 people. Good and dangerous being 2 people, because if I'm extremely consistent, if one of the people is a person and people are very consistent, it kind of forces the other one to be as well. Whereas if one person is not so consistent, it's a bit like having a study buddy, and the study buddy can either have a good impact on you or a bad impact. So I think that's something to be aware of, right?
Yeah, but that also helped when you were texting in Portuguese and I wasn't texting in Norwegian, except with the help of Google Translator. Although you hadn't had any course in Portuguese. I had 2 courses in Norwegian. And 1 introductory, and the last one had been the last level actually at the university. So theoretically, the university gave me the Norwegian degree that would allow me even to take a degree in Norwegian. But I felt still not comfortable, and when you, with your method, start learning Norwegian, Portuguese, I felt that I knew that you were gonna pass my Norwegian degree very soon.
Thank you. And that's a really good advertisement for this channel as well, because this channel is in great part dedicated to showing that method or other ways of, because I'm quite not against. I think language studies have their purpose, but I think there are much more efficient ways of learning languages, or that the language classes in school should just be one part of the strategy. So I think that's, and this immersion that we're talking about today is certainly another pillar, but not maybe we can go from there to another point which I find very important. I believe that language, just practicing the language, will take you, it's great for reaching fluency, where fluency is you being able to speak it quite easily, but it doesn't take you all the way to near flawlessness, where you feel extremely comfortable, you can express yourself in a very elegant manner, really. So that's also something that I'm quite passionate about the fact that you should really accompany
That's true.
just this immersion with studies on the side, not just because this is really going a bit like we did when I was writing messages and using the dictionary. That's kind of studies on the side that accompany the immersion in itself, and not only is this important because it increases your language level and makes it easier to speak together, but also because it gives you this boost where you get really comfortable in the language. Because if you're improving almost from day to day because you're studying on the side, an improvement that you won't get just from speaking, then it gets so comfortable. And yeah, that's one thing I wanted to ask you. For me, sometimes I'm more comfortable in speaking a language that is a significantly lower level than other languages I speak. English or now Portuguese are not necessarily the languages I feel most comfortable speaking, because I feel like if I've stagnated or I feel like I'm not improving anymore, that kind of makes me less comfortable. Whereas if I've studied German efficiently or maybe rather Spanish or French for a long time, and I feel like that curve is up and going, I feel more comfortable speaking that language here than speaking a Portuguese or English, which is kind of stagnated, or I feel even going back a bit here.
But the only person who knows that is you. The person you're talking to is not with you every day, so that person doesn't know that you're going up.
That's true.
That person's gonna listen to you and think.
So this is not your experience, actually.
No. But it's interesting. You're guided perhaps by your inner feeling of.
Yeah, exactly.
Progresses.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, I get and I also think that for me, at least, I have language days and I have language like good days and bad days in any language. And I think maybe this is connected in some way. I can have a really good day in a foreign language, or I can have a bad day. And sometimes that feeling can also switch very quickly. Sometimes I've also noticed that it can switch like this from a single comment. Is this something you've felt, good days and bad days in the languages? And have you any theory what makes the day good or bad?
I think there are good days and bad days, but I don't know if that's something that those that are listening to us notice, or if it's just
I think that's a good point. Yeah, I think it's an inner, but I think the inner feeling,
I sometimes think that it's like when you have a pimple and you're so self-conscious of the pimple and you don't want to have it. And when you're talking to your friends, no one has seen it.
Yeah, good point. That's a good visual. And as we know, visual examples make things more memorable. So I bet no one is going to forget that argument and that pimple.
I just remember my teenage years when my friends we're as a group. Sometimes someone was so worried about the pimple that they would put something to cover it. But the thing to cover it was much more noticeable than the pimple itself. And no one had noticed the pimple before, but everybody had noticed the thing that was covering the pimple. And I feel that's a little bit like with languages as well. That's something that you told me before. Every time we would start speaking Norwegian, I would say to the people who were listening to me, I'm not good at Norwegian. So this is not going to be good, but we're going to try. And you said that was not good because that was like the thing covering the pimple. That's absolutely how everybody's going to listen.
Yeah, that's a brilliant argument. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Didn't think about that. If you enter into the conversation with confidence, that's also the person is going to think you speak a lot better. If you enter into the conversation saying, really, I'm not comfortable, I don't speak very, very well, then of course, and the other person is also then going to pay so much more attention to all your flaws. And
you told me that when we were, I think it was with Norwegian, because I always would say that. And eventually you told me, Tana, you're speaking really well. But when we met, since you didn't want to speak at all, and you were always saying, this is going to be very bad, just be prepared because it's not going to be good. I already would listen to you with this in mind, and I was going to think that it's not as good as it actually is. And so you should stop saying this because it sets a barrier. But that was very good for me, and I would I started repeating this to other people as well, and I try to stop.
That's a brilliant example. I wanted, now that we've kind of established that studies is important, studies should accompany any language immersion you're doing with a partner.
Can I just say something before?
Yeah, for sure.
Because, okay, so just a brief summary.
Yeah.
Met each other, not with our native languages, had different languages each day of the week until we got too nervous, so we switched to English. And then I didn't think that was the best thing, so we went back probably to Spanish. And Alan was getting very good at Portuguese just by studying by himself and texting. And I was stagnated with my Norwegian. That was what I felt. And I'm a little bit competitive. Plus, I felt that we were a team, so he would be able to talk to everybody in my family, and I would feel not that good speaking Norwegian. And I was nervous. I met your family in Norwegian already, and this was something very good. Because switching with our family could
that would be tricky.
But I didn't feel very confident when I was speaking Norwegian with your family. So you were getting very good in Portuguese, and I said, okay, we need to stop again because this is not working. It's only you who are getting fantastic in Portuguese. So we stopped with Spanish as well, and it became just Norwegian and Portuguese. Yeah. And that helped very much. That explains that is the biggest cause for my current Norwegian level. And I think for your Portuguese level as well. We start also reading books in each other's language, but speaking was the thing that helped. But again, that immersion led to a certain level, and we stopped there. Yeah. And I feel that I can communicate myself. I can communicate all of the ideas. You see Brazilian films, I see Norwegian films, we read books and all of this. But there are certain mistakes that I make. Yeah. And there are certain mistakes you make, grammatical mistakes. And we're not getting better in those. Yeah. So we are in the stagnating part. We are
definitely in the stagnating part, yeah. We've even made a video about how to kind of break this plateau and leave this stagnated part and continue improving, because that's the thing that just a pure immersion is not going to do for you usually. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's something interesting with German, because German is quite close to Norwegian, and I want a small break from all these grammatical and vocabulary studies. So I'm trying to learn German differently from you. I'm trying to learn it just through immersion, reading books, listening, speaking, and I already now feel that that's it gets easier to talk, but it's not as fast, not nearly as fast, and it's not going to take me to that level of flawlessness that studies would do.
So German school, I was gonna start my PhD in Germany, and I said, okay, so we need to learn German, and let's try my method. And I haven't been a good student because I haven't been that structured.
We're going to change that.
But what we did first was that we were in Norway, and you said that we would speak 5 minutes a day German. Yeah. That was the first step. Yeah. I took a course in Brazil many years ago, just 3 months, and it was in 2010. I didn't remember anything by the time. So basically it was Alan speaking and I was silent for 5 minutes a day.
For 5 minutes a day.
And then I moved to Germany. But then COVID came and I stayed in Norway and life happened, PhD, that demands a lot of time. So I didn't guarantee a certain, I would say that 30 minutes a day is already good. And I didn't manage
for studies, not for immersion.
No? Yeah. And I didn't manage to take that time to make it really... in a really structured manner, 30 minutes a day, not at all. So we tried a different strategy, and that's, I think, what you're gonna get now.
Yes, I will. However, I think that's such a good point that I'd forgotten about that too, but this starting just, even though you can speak, just saying that for 5 minutes a day and put a timer, you will only speak that language, and then you will increase to 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, etc. But even though you weren't able to say anything, even if I hadn't been able to say anything, it's such a good way of starting, because you start slow, you build a habit, everyone has 5 minutes, but more importantly, it makes the language urgent. So as I was saying before the battery went out, studying the language just 5 minutes a day makes it urgent, because it means that those 5 minutes are going to be utterly unproductive or uncomfortable or awkward unless you actually study. And so it's kind of every day you have a reason to study the language to make, and I think that's something that's extremely efficient, and you can do it like we did, 5 minutes a day. Having to use the language, or I think also another good way is finding friends or finding in a group that you meet regularly, for example once a week. It could be a sports team, etc. That makes it something that you do regularly, where you have to study that language, because you will feel positive if you've studied, you will feel good, or you will feel guilty or stupid if you haven't studied. So that's a really good advice. And that brings me to the first of...
Don't feel stupid, you're never stupid.
Good to add. That brings me at the first of 3 objects I wanted to show today, which kind of can symbolize different tips or different objects we use for language learning.
That's the only object I see that makes sense for me.
The first one is, it's not focusing well, but it is a jar of...
That's how the influencers do, right? But it doesn't.
It doesn't work. Either way, it's a jar of beans. And what we do here is that we have set some specific rules. We've spoken about a lot of different ways of setting rules, like, for example, study 30 minutes every day, speaking 5 minutes, or you can, and this, regardless of the rules you put for yourself, it's very important to have a way of measuring if you do those rules and make that as visual as possible. So what we do in order to kind of reward ourselves to study is that we, every day, if we do the things we're supposed to do in terms of languages, we add 1 bean each to this glass, and then each bean symbolizes, for example, 10 euros that we put into a fund that we then can use for a trip to that country. And we could do this without the glass and the beans, but this makes it so visual. Just the sound of this bean, a new bean being added to the glass, is such a nice feeling. So we kind of see our progress.
And seeing the beans, it meant that we spoke German the whole day.
Yeah.
That was our most radical moment, which we decided that I think it came from me again.
Mm-hmm.
So crazy ideas
Come from you.
come from me. And I said that, okay, enough. Many years have gone by. I haven't really studied German.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just gonna speak German every day. And Alan, of course, said, yeah, of course, that's perfect. And he had the beans idea. So if we spoke German the whole day, then a bean would come. And just seeing the beans there, it meant that we managed to speak just German for many days. And that was very exciting.
I think, yeah.
And again, in the beginning, I felt that I was basically silent the whole day. But eventually I was speaking something. And when we went to Germany, I felt that it really helped.
Yeah.
Now, in every sentence, I feel that I make like 25 mistakes in a very short sentence, or 117. But still, I managed to make a reservation at the doctor's office. I managed to talk to them and understand which day is possible, the time, and have this kind of conversation if we needed. When we were traveling around and we were talking to the people from the hotel, we were speaking German, and it was much easier for Alan than for me, but still, when I was alone, I could do it as well. And that maybe it sounds very little, but still, when I was alone at doctor's office and could have a conversation and could set the date in which I would come back and explain things like this more procedural and formal things, that was very exciting for me. The same when I was in my pole dance class, and this girl talked to me and we're speaking German, just German. And he added me in this group for the class, and I gave my number in German, and we continue to speak German. And we didn't speak English at all. That was so exciting. I went out of there, my heart was beating so much, and and I felt really excited and a little bit shy as well, because I knew that it was. I have, for me, it's difficult to make mistakes. I have a friend, Leonel, and he gave classes in English, and he said that he could identify two types of students. One, I remember mostly the second because it's the one that I identify myself with, but I think that one was those that didn't really study and wouldn't be very diligent in studying. And the second type was the one that were those who were very afraid of making mistakes. And because they were afraid of making mistakes, they wouldn't just start speaking English to each other. And that's me. When I was living in France, every time that I would walking around the city, I had a dictionary with me. So I could check the grammar and the words to know that I was gonna speak the best that I could. And it took time. It was a good strategy as well to study. But I have this fear of making mistakes and grammatical mistakes. I don't like that. And that can be an obstacle to learning language. And when I was speaking German with those people I was mentioning, very thrilling, extremely exciting. I was proud and also a little bit shy because I felt I was making many mistakes, but it worked. The beans work.
The beans work, yeah. And then maybe, I think, kind of talking like this, it touches upon a lot of different tips for learning the languages, but I think also this, when you have a partner to practice with, a partner or a friend, anything, a language partner, then also you have a unique opportunity of using what we've mentioned, this element of collaboration or even competition, because both collaboration and competition are two of the main drivers for motivation there is on this planet. And being a single language or a sole language learner learning a language on your own, it's more difficult to have this element. So really trying to find someone to study with, and on the internet as well, there are so many sites for finding language exchange. But so then a bit how this bean thing is both a way of collaborating, because we collaborate towards a common goal of, for example, financing a vacation or something. Also competition, I just had the idea that the best would maybe be if you had the beans and I had the chickpeas, so it kind of would be very visible. So if it's a majority of beige in the glass, it means I've been better with my studies. So kind of it's so many ways of tweaking these tips to fit. But I think, yes, I wanted to bring the second object of today, which is this one, the jackfruit. And what this represents, this is something we found on a tree a few days ago. I really like picking fruit, and then I don't always like or know how to prepare them. So I have no idea how to even open this one, how to prepare it.
Or how to know if it's done?
If it's finished. So what I thought was that the one of us who is worst at the language duties this week has to open and prepare a nice thing with this jackfruit on Sunday.
That is very exciting. It should be the prize for.
Okay, so then it's this. Yeah, okay, it could be the prize. Yeah, get to open and eat the jackfruit. Either way, this could be anything. It could be a massage, breakfast in the bed, or anything, but that you can establish. And it's kind of multi-purpose. It's something you could do that's fun, adventurous, but that's also an incentive to study languages, because if that means that you will receive a massage on Sunday or breakfast or a surprise date or something, that means that you will probably study a bit more throughout the week, and no one enjoys giving massages, so that means that I would maybe study even more in order not to give a massage. But yeah, so that's another advice, I think. Anything else, Tana, before we round up with the last object? I'm also watching the memory card, and we don't have so much. After another technical problem, we are back.
Yes, And just before I'm gonna get the last object, I just wanted to share another thing that I remember. When we say that we use the bean strategy, the 5 minutes a day strategy to learn German. And it was basically that because I was a terrible student and I was very bad at learning on my own except for the beans and the 5 minutes a day. I wouldn't set a time in which I was gonna read grammar or read a book, and I should. I did that just for a few days, in which I would listen to a film just in German with German subtitles and short things for children. But even with those little things, 5 minutes a day and the bean strategy, we managed to go to Germany and we live in a flat, which we share with 2 friends who are German. And we saw a whole movie that was made for adults, not for children, in German, with German subtitles. And it worked perfectly. That, for me, that was already saying a lot.
That's quite impressive.
Yeah. Cool.
So, the last object today. And I think one of the strategies we're going to apply onwards, because in this video we talked a lot about what we've tried, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and I think that's really the key, to always keep trying new things, because we always talk about how learning the right way really speeds up learning, but in order to achieve that better learning, you also have to learn in a way, and you have to practice and always refine your methods. So I think that's also one of the main messages of this video, that we have given lots of different advice on how we have done this, but really the way forward would be to kind of maybe test some of these and adjust it to what works for you. So here I am offering a new one, Tana, which I propose that we start with now, because we have been a bit lazy lately. So in this one I have 5 notes, one with all of the languages we speak, with English excluded. So now you're picking the language we're going to finish this video in, finish and speak the entire day.
Ah, français!
Ah,
c'est
génial!
précisément la chose que j'ai dit.
Alors, c'est ça que tu as voulu?
Non! C'est que je pensais que...
Ouais. Alors, ça...
Tu les langues qu'on parle, ils sont là?
Les 5, oui.
Les 5 portugais, norvégien...
Donc tu as choisi bien ou pas?
J'ai choisi probablement la langue qui est après l'allemand et la langue qui est encore le plus difficile pour moi.
Oui, alors c'est bien que tu as choisi ça, parce qu'il faut pratiquer alors.
Il faut pratiquer, c'est vrai. Quand on a voyagé à Paris ensemble, c'était très bon. Et je sens que simplement avec 1 jour ou 2 jours, c'est déjà... Ça aide beaucoup. C'est déjà plus facile. Mais quand on n'a pas la possibilité de voyager à Paris tous les mois.
Non. Et le but de cette vidéo ici est de dire à tout le monde qu'on n'a pas besoin de pouvoir voyager ou habiter dans la langue, dans le pays pour apprendre la langue. On peut faire cette même chose dans notre propre maison, chez nous. Et ça, mais il faut avoir une structure, il faut vraiment avoir un plan. Donc c'est ça, et je crois que c'est bien terminé le vidéo sur cet point. Ok, qu'est-ce que tu penses?
Très bonne, très bonne.
Alors, merci beaucoup et à plus tôt.
À plus tôt.
À plus tard. Alors, il faut qu'on pratique le français.
Seulement une chose plus, je pensais qu'on a dit que ça aide beaucoup de parler avec ton partenaire dans une autre langue, mais aussi il est une activité très 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 intéressante. Et quel est le mot pour ça? Divertido.
C'est drôle.
C'est drôle de faire ça. C'est une activité ensemble. C'est pas seulement utile, c'est drôle aussi.
Alors,
merci.
ciao.
Ciao.